Everyone in Feecamp knew about Mother Patton's story. She had a hard time with her husband. He used to hit her a lot, like when you hit wheat to separate the grains from the stalk. Her husband was the boss of a fishing boat. He married her because she was pretty, even though she didn't have much money. Patton was good at sailing, but he was mean. He often went to Father Aubyn's place, where he drank a lot of brandy. Some days he drank just a few glasses, but on lucky days he'd have 8 or even 10 glasses or even more if he felt like it. The brandy was served by Father Aubyn's daughter, a nice girl with dark hair. People came to the inn because she was pretty, not because of any rumors about her. When Patton came in, he'd look at her and say nice things. After a glass or two of brandy, he'd start flirting. By the time he had 4 glasses, he'd try to kiss her. If he drank even more, Father Aubyn would bring him more drinks. Father Aubyn knew how to make money, so he made Desiree walk around the tables to encourage people to drink more. Desiree, being a good daughter, smiled and joked with the customers. Patton got used to seeing Desiree's face all the time, even when he was out at sea fishing. He'd think about her while he worked, whether the weather was stormy or calm, and whether it was bright from the moon or dark. Even when his friends were sleeping on the boat, he'd be thinking of her. He always imagined her smiling, pouring brandy, and asking if he was happy. He thought about her so much that he couldn't resist asking her to marry him. He was rich, with his own boat, nets, and a small house. Desiree's dad, Father Aubyn, didn't have much, so they quickly agreed to get married. But just 3 days after the wedding, Patton started to regret it. He wondered why he had thought Desiree was special. He thought she tricked him into marrying her by putting something in his brandy. He was angry all the time, yelling at everything and breaking things. When he was fishing, he'd take out his anger on the fish. When he got home, he'd take it out on Desiree. He treated her terribly, even hitting her. Life at home became really hard for her. For 10 years, people in retinue talked about how Patton hit his wife and yelled at her for small things. He was really good at cursing, using big words and loud tones that nobody else in Feecamp could match. When his boat came back from fishing, everyone waited for him to start yelling as soon as he saw his wife's white cap. He'd steer the boat, looking for his wife among the watching women, even though it was hard with the waves. When he spotted her, he'd start yelling at her so loudly that everyone could hear, even over the wind and waves. People felt sorry for her, but they also laughed because his yelling was so intense. When he got off the boat, he'd keep yelling while unloading the fish, attracting all the idle people around. He'd use words like cannon shots or thunder, making a big scene. When they got home, he'd keep insulting her, with her crying and him shouting. Behind closed doors, he'd hit her for any small reason. He never stopped once he started, and he'd remind her of why he was angry with every blow, mentioning her father's bad brandy. The poor woman lived in constant fear, always shaking in her body and soul, expecting to be beaten badly all the time. This went on for 10 years. She was so scared that she'd turn pale whenever she talked to someone, and she only thought about the beatings she was afraid of. She became thinner, paler, and drier than a smoked fish. One night, when her husband was out at sea, she woke up to the sound of the wind roaring loudly. She sat up in bed, shaking, but when she didn't hear anything more, she lay back down. Then there was a loud noise in the chimney that shook the whole house. It sounded like angry animals snorting and roaring in the sky. She got up and ran to the harbor. Other women were coming with lanterns. Men were gathering too, watching the waves crashing. The storm lasted 15 hours. 11 sailors, including Patton, didn't come back. His boat, the Jeune Amélie, was found wrecked near Dieppe. His sailors' bodies were found, but not his. Since his boat seemed to be cut in two, she worried and hoped for a long time that he might come back. But she slowly got used to the idea that he was gone, although she still got scared whenever someone came by unexpectedly. About 4 years after he disappeared, she was walking past the house of an old sea captain who had died. They were selling his things, including a parrot. It was green with a blue head and looked grumpy. The auctioneer said, 3 francs for a bird that talks like a lawyer. A friend of Patton's widow nudged her and said, "You should buy that bird since you have money. It would be good company for you. That bird is worth more than 30 francs. Anyway, you can sell it for 20 or 25. Patton's widow added 50 centimes, and she got the bird in a little cage. She took it home and was opening the door to give it something to drink when it bit her finger and made it bleed. "Oh, how naughty it is," she said. But she still gave it some seeds and watched it clean its feathers while keeping an eye on its new home and her. The next morning, as it was getting light, she heard a loud, deep voice saying, "Are you going to get up, Carrion?" She got so scared that she hid under the sheets. When Patton was with her, he'd always say those words when he woke up. Trembling, she curled up in a ball, expecting to be beaten. She kept her face buried in the pillows, whispering, "Oh no. He's here. Oh no. He's here. Oh no. He's back." Minutes went by, but it stayed quiet in the room. She stuck her head out of the bed, scared that he was watching and ready to hurt her. Except for a ray of sun from the window, she didn't see anything. She thought he must be hiding. She waited a long time and then, feeling braver, she said to herself, "I must have dreamed it. There's nobody here." Feeling a bit better, she closed her eyes. But then, she heard a furious voice nearby, like the voice of a drowned man, shouting, "Hey! When are you going to get up, you brat?" She jumped out of bed, used to obeying, like always, remembering that voice and expecting a beating. She said, "I'm here, Patton. What do you want?" But Patton didn't answer. She looked around, in the chimney, under the bed, and finally sat down, feeling anxious, thinking Patton's ghost was there to torture her. She remembered the attic where you needed a ladder to go. Maybe he was hiding there to scare her. Maybe he was trapped on some faraway island and just returned, angrier than before. She asked, "Are you up there, Patton?" But Patton didn't answer. Terrified, she climbed the ladder, looked around, but found nothing. She sat on some straw and cried, feeling scared. While she cried, she heard Patton talking downstairs. He didn't sound as angry, just complaining about the bad weather and being hungry. She shouted through the ceiling, "I'm here, Patton. I'll make your food. Please don't be mad." She hurried back downstairs. No one was there. She felt weak, like death was near, and tried to run for help from the neighbors. Then a voice near her said, "I haven't had my breakfast, by G." It was the parrot in his cage, watching her with his sharp eyes. She looked at him and whispered, "Ah."
So it's you?
The parrot shook his head and said, "Just you wait. I'll teach you how to loaf." Something clicked in her mind. She felt like it was him, the dead man, who had come back in the form of this bird to keep tormenting her. She thought he'd curse, bite, and swear at her like before, just to make the neighbors laugh. So she grabbed the cage and caught the bird, even though it scratched and bit her. She held it tightly and crushed it until it stopped moving and making noise. Then she wrapped it up and went outside in her nightgown, barefoot. She went to the dock, where the waves were crashing, and shook the cloth, dropping the little, dead bird, which looked like grass. Then she went back inside, knelt before the empty cage, and prayed for forgiveness, feeling like she'd done something really wrong.